James, cheers.
Chris, thank you.
Welcome to Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Good to have it being recorded in Canada.
I have not recorded a live Manufacturing Happy Hour in a while. It's been Zoom for like 2 years, basically. So
Well,
it is good to be up
It's
here.
one of the perks about being in the office, I think.
Yes, no, I would agree with that. So we're up here. We're in Toronto. And I was asking you this as we were walking down the stairs. If we were having this at if we were having this conversation at an establishment in Toronto, where might that be?
Well, depends on the season. So, like, Canada can run all 4 seasons, right? So if you're in the summer, definitely we'd be having it at the lake. So, you know, on the dock, something overlooking the water for sure for me. Winter, you know, bundle up, find me a pub, an English pub in the city.
Yeah.
You know, dark glasses, dark wood, dark establishment. That's where I'd like to be.
Any favorites? Since we are recording this in winter, what would be a winter pub?
Well, if you get here, I promise you won't have a bad time if you go to a bar called Two Cats in Toronto. It's just a special place for all of the wrong reasons, and I promise you'll love it.
All right. Well, let's say we're having this conversation at Two Cats. We want to get to know you a little bit today. So we're going to talk about, I'm interested because this conversation is happening about a year after Rockwell Automation bought Fiix, and we'll jump into acquisitions, what it's like getting acquired, how you lead during that process. But we do want to get to know you a little bit first.
Sure.
So you got your start at Microsoft and Blackberry.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that experience and what led you to Fiix.
Yeah, so I was working at Microsoft. It was great. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Microsoft was a exciting, happy place to be at that point in time. And it just happened to be where I was going to university at the time. It was a city called Waterloo, Ontario, just outside of Toronto here, where Blackberry, Research in Motion at the time, was headquartered. So I started working there. It was cool being part of wireless, and then it exploded. And, I was young, I was early in my career, but Blackberry was taking off. My career was taking off at the same time with it. And it was awesome. It was this really unique experience of working with like really smart people, working with my friends, having purpose, right? We were changing wireless industry at the same time. And solving tough problems. I was traveling the world. I had big marketing budgets. Like it was kind of like a really unique time. And that lasted for like 10 to 12 years. But as the arc goes of Blackberry, it goes up and it was on its way down. And I tell people that I worked at Blackberry when it was cool to work at Blackberry. It stopped being cool to work at Blackberry, so I left.
Sure.
But I wanted to join like a startup. And I actually didn't know what that meant at the time. I had very little industrial software experience. I dabbled into some IoT type stuff with Blackberry, but didn't know anything about industrial. And I've met the founding team at Fiix, and the company was called Maintenance Assistant at the time. And they had what I thought was a cool technology, a good team, a great team. But the biggest thing was I felt like they had an opportunity to completely disrupt maintenance software and turn it into cloud, consumer, on-prem, from on-prem legacy software, a lot like Salesforce.com did with the CRM space. Turns out that bet was right. Here we are 7 years later, 300 employees, raised Series A, B, and C, acquired by Rockwell Automation. So it's been quite the journey, and that's how I ended up kind of just fell into the industrial space.
Love the synopsis. I have to go back to the Blackberry experience first because we want to pull some lessons from this. And I mean, you said it. It was cool to work at Blackberry. Blackberry was an iconic company. So what did you learn from that experience as to someone that was the absolute leader that ultimately you don't hear much about him now?
Yeah. So there's a few things. I mean, you take a lot of positives when you work at a place like that, but then you also view some of the challenges that the organization had, and you're like, okay, I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. On the positive side, there was, we really worked fast. And so now being a part of Fiix, you probably see just how fast, we move as an organization. Other things that we really focus on here at Fiix is just like how awesome the talent is in the organization. I really enjoyed working with like really smart people solving tough problems. And I vowed that we would bring that back to the organization when we came and we started building Fiix. On the other side of the coin, BlackBerry was eclipsed by Android and iPhone in the consumer technology market. And one of the lessons that I've taken away from that was just that to never really rest on your laurels as an organization, always be innovating, always be looking to disrupt yourself. And so, that's something that we bring here. We're never really satisfied with the position that we have or how much further we can push the boundaries of technology and maintenance or industrial. And I think that's something that I learned deeply because I experienced what would have been the negative side of that at a company like Blackberry, that we were like, no, we're going to always be innovating, always disrupt ourselves before somebody else will do it.
Excellent lessons. Never rest on your laurels. I think that's something we see in the manufacturing world all the time these days. I've got a bit of a two-part question for you next.
Go for it.
I was listening to another podcast that you were on. This is probably 2 or 3 years ago in the rearview mirror, but you were sharing a story about when you were becoming CEO of Fiix, and the board asked you, what kind of company do you want to build? You gave 3 answers. Do you remember what those are?
I sure do. I actually give this story to every new employee that joins Fiix. So we sit down and I give the same story. So I've delivered this story a number of times. But the board asked me what I thought was a very simple question. And the very simple question was, James, we're about to make you CEO, because I was the president and COO. I was taking over for the founders at the time. And they said, James, what kind of company do you want to build? And what I thought was a very simple question actually required a bunch of introspection. And what we found in that introspection, when I really dug into it with the team and my people and everybody that was involved in building the company, the answer had 3 parts to it. And the 3 parts were, 1, I want to be the best. We hire the best. Good companies grow at like 30%. We're going to try to grow at 70% because that's what the best companies try to do. We only bring in people that we think are the best from a partnership perspective or investor perspective. But what we've realized about being the best is that the best companies just don't sit there and like tap themselves on the back and say, hey, we're the best, we can stop now. It's about this journey about getting better every day, every month, every quarter, every year. And the compounding effect of getting better every little bit along that journey allows you to be the best. And that was the journey that we had to take, was like getting better every month, every quarter, every year. And the compounding effect of all of that, allowed us to strive to be the best. So that was the first part of the question. I want to be the best. Second part, when they said, James, what kind of company do you want to build? I said, I care very deeply about the experience that every single fixer has at the company. Going back to like my Blackberry story, I had this amazing experience. I was young. I was early in my career. I was learning. I was growing. I was working with smart people. All these great things kind of contributed to an amazing career experience. And what I was able to take from that was, wow, I want to give back that same experience to whoever comes to Fiix. But the challenge with that is that you have like 300 people in the organization. I can't personally be responsible for 300 people's happiness as much as I want to and as much as I try. So our job is to create this like platform where we invest in all sorts of things. Depending on the individual, Chris, you might care about work-life balance. Another individual might care about making a ton of money. Another individual might care about working with really smart people beside them. Another person might care about work autonomy. And so having all of these diverse backgrounds are amazing. That's how you have a diverse organization. But now you have to build this platform where all these people can be satisfied in the experience that they want to build. So that was my job, was building this platform as the CEO of like where all these experiences could kind of happen. And then the third part was, James, what kind of company do you want to build? I want to be the best. I care very deeply about the experience. The third part was, I want to do it for the right reasons. We could make money on the internet selling guns and cigarettes if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And we decided not to. We decided that there was a higher purpose for the work that we were doing in industrial spaces. And fundamentally, we believe that proper maintenance leads to sustainable outcomes in the world, whether that's carbon emissions reduction, health and safety outcomes, waste reduction outcomes, energy reduction outcomes, higher output. There's circular economy components, in particular when globalization happens. So we believe that through proper maintenance, you can create better sustainable outcomes in the world. And that's our higher purpose as an organization. That's why we do this. And so it's a combination of those 3 answers.
Yeah.
When somebody asked me, James, what kind of company you want to build? That's after some deep introspection, what seemed like a simple question became something that required a lot of thought.
So I'm curious, the acquisition by Rockwell occurred a year ago then. Did you have a similar list when you were trying to figure out, is the Rockwell acquisition right? Were you trying to align it with that answer? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I looked at it, and the board and our investors all looked at it from maybe a little bit of a different perspective. And I think this is where Fiix was unique. Most times you look at it from a financial perspective, right? You're a for-profit organization. You take a look at the numbers. Does it make sense? That's only one part of the equation from my perspective. What we had to look at it from is all of our stakeholders. So we looked at it from our customers. Is this better for our customers? Are they going to have better solutions from us? Will they have better integrated solutions from us? Will they be able to move along their digital journey better because of the Rockwell acquisition of Fiix? The answer is yes, categorically yes. What about our employees? What's happening with our employees? Are they just going to lay off everyone, or are we going to grow as an organization? Turns out we're going to grow as an organization. We look at it from a shareholder perspective. Financially, does this make sense with our growth perspective, et cetera? Does it make sense for our community where we live and work in Toronto and in Canada? And all of those areas that we looked at from every stakeholder perspective, we felt like this was a really positive outcome. So when we thought about this, we didn't have like a list of, hey, does this meet our criteria? We looked at it from a persona or a stakeholder perspective, not just from a financial outcome. And that's how we ended up with a decision where we were like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense for everybody that's involved in this company.
Yeah. Okay. So you're looking at it from the stakeholders, internal, external, et cetera.
Yep.
I have to ask, tell us a bit about the acquisition. What went through your head when you realized it was real? Like, were you getting pitched all the time? Like, do you get calls about this? Like, how do you filter out noise from something that's legitimate?
Totally. So Fiix, hot company in a hot space, right? So we had no shortage of either investors wanting to get a piece of the company or acquirers that were interested in either partnering with us or acquiring us. And as we were going through the journey of kind of a high growth organization and adding as much revenue and customers and doing the impact that we were in the market, I would take calls. My job as the CEO is to have interesting conversations. And so when Rockwell called me for the first time, I was like, this is an interesting conversation. Well, we will have this conversation. We weren't planning on getting acquired at the time. Wasn't kind of what the board or management were interested in. But Rockwell just really got aggressive with us. They learned a little bit about us. We learned a little bit about them. And they fell in love with the business. They fell in love with their customers. They fell in love with our technology. They fell in love with the management and the employee base of the company. And once those things started lining up, then we started getting into the details. Now, one thing I will tell you, Chris, is it happened fast.
Yeah.
So we're in COVID, right? So COVID is 4 months old, 5 months old and still the world doesn't know what's happening. We don't know, is the economy going to tank? What's happening with industrial customers or their supply chain? All of those things are still relatively unknown at the time. So we're going through the deal. We're negotiating on the final terms of the deal. And I lay out some kind of final details to Rockwell on a phone call. And I get an email back the next morning. It says, we've agreed and signed. And I literally sat there at my home office and I just leaned back in my chair and I went, holy shit, we just sold the company. And that was it. It just happens that quick. And, when big organizations like Rockwell want to do something that's strategic to their business, they move fast on those paths. And we were a nimble organization, so it was easy for us to make these decisions. And once we went down the path, it happened really quickly.
I look at it the same way as consistency or habits, right? You're constantly fielding those calls, right? Like it goes on for months, years, whatever it is. But right when critical mass hits, right, it just goes instantaneously, right? Like people think it's a very quick process, but I mean, do you look at it as, hey, I was fielding calls like this for a long time, but when it happened, it just finally sped ahead?
Yeah.
Do you think about it that way?
Yeah, part of the job of a CEO and the board of an organization that's growing as quickly as you do is to create as many options as you can in your business. Optionality kind of creates value. And so we thought about it like, we always knew that we had an opportunity to become a $1 billion organization, a $1 billion business. What are all of the paths that we can take to get there? And then keep all of those doors open to us. So I had all the conversations all the time. And that's just part of the job. Now, what's interesting is that it might not yield dividends when you do it.
Yeah.
Sure enough, a year later, 2 years later, somebody that I spoke to at a conference or kept a relationship with calls me up and says, hey, we're ready to do this now. And it moves quickly at that point.
So I want to focus on the people for a little bit. You've brought up the employees at Fiix in almost every answer you've given so far. You care about the experience of every individual Fixer. now we're dealing with an organization that's a lot more people, right? It's not just Fiix.
Sure.
You have the entire Rockwell world, their whole partner network. It's a beast. So how do you avoid an us versus them mentality in the case of an acquisition, right? Because every acquisition is probably going to have people with different experiences, et cetera, coming in, different types of company, different go-to-market strategies. How do you balance that?
Yeah. Lots of different vectors on this one, right? Like, because there's a lot of ways that the train can go off the tracks when you're doing something like this. The first and foremost, one of the things that we looked at when we looked at all the stakeholders and the employee stakeholders was like, what are the values of an organization? And it seemed to me that Rockwell cared about the same things that Fiix cared about. You know, Rockwell, they care about their employees and the well-being of their employees. They care that they have 20, 30, 40-year veterans in the organization. Rockwell also cares about sustainability in the same way that we care about sustainability. And so I was like, okay, like those are deeply ingrained things that we care about in the organization. So like from a values perspective, everything kind of aligned. The other thing that I thought was really interesting and unique about Rockwell was just how focused they were on the customer. So it didn't matter what was happening within the internal teams. Rockwell was always going to do what was best for the customer. And that seemed to me, and I've learned over the past year, totally true, that is ubiquitous, that every employee in Rockwell cares about the customer. And it's always about the customer experience first. So as long as everyone's focused on the customer, regardless of if you have differences of opinions, nobody's right, nobody's wrong, there's just different paths to get there, then I felt like Rockwell was going to get the right thing done. So that was a great thing for us. Now, there's always room for what I'll call healthy tension in organizations. Fiix is going to move fast. We make fast decisions. We build products in a different way. We bring them to market in a different way than maybe Rockwell does with their legacy products. But that's okay, because when you're something as big as Rockwell, you're not just like one entity. You're like a solar system, right? And the solar system has different planets moving at different speeds. So you might have like a big planet that's really cold and big moving on the outside of that solar system. And then you got like hot planets that are spinning really fast close to the sun. That's what Fiix is. We're like a hot planet spinning close to the sun. And so
I love the analogy.
If I'm Blake, sitting in the CEO chair of Rockwell, I'm looking at this like all of my planets. And I just got to keep the solar system kind of in balance. And so it's okay to have different ones moving at different speeds. And Fiix just happens to be one that's moving at high speed.
What I find interesting is you led with values, then you started talking about customer focus. You didn't really mention technology in that answer as you were thinking
Technology is an output, right? Like technology is an output of the decisions that people and the organization makes. Technology, in my view, is like an enabler. Like we use cloud technology because it's easier and better for our customers to deploy maintenance software. Cloud is an enabler of a business goal. The technology itself isn't driving anything. It's the business goals, and then the technology comes along with it. In my view.
No, I was just curious, right? I think as people are listening to this, we have a lot of manufacturing leaders of all shapes and sizes that listen to this show. One thing I'm curious about is, what advice do you give to other manufacturing leaders that find themselves in the middle of an acquisition opportunity, whether it's looking to acquire or being acquired as you reflect on this past year?
Yeah. First of all, acquisitions are hard. They're hard, and a lot of them fail. And I think there are I said this earlier, there's lots of reasons where the train can go off the tracks.
What are some of those?
Yeah, well, there's culture misalignment. Goals misalignment. Can you retain the talent that had built the organization? Are you integrating the organization in the right way? Are you drowning them with processes that maybe an acquisition doesn't need? These are all kind of the holistic view that you want to try to avoid in some of these areas. And so, if I'm a manufacturing company and I'm going through an acquisition, or I'm thinking about acquiring, you have to be very, very deliberate about every single move that happens. Take an employee that's been a part of the transition. Everything that happens that they see that's happening in the organization, their antenna is going to be up saying, are they lying to me? Is that true? I don't know. Like, am I going to have a job? Am I going to be replaced? Is the strategy changing? And they're going to be looking for signals everywhere. And so I think the greatest thing that we could provide, that anybody can provide as you go through an acquisition like that, is clarity of thought and then consistency of communication. And if you do that often enough, then I think you have an opportunity to skate through relatively unscathed. We had a framework at Fiix that we use, and I give this to anybody that's going through this, but we had this framework. It was a US election at the time, so we were probably watching too much CNN or, NBC News or whatever it was. But we had this mental framework where it was promises made, promises kept.
Mm-hmm.
And so we literally wrote down the promises that we made to our employees and to the company,
Mm-hmm.
and then we tracked whether we kept them or not.
Mm.
And that was our way of holding ourselves accountable, but also like showing that slide at every presentation that we brought the entire company together with. And we had things like, hey, no one was going to get laid off. We didn't lay anybody off. We were going to remain a B Corp organization. We remained a B Corp organization. We were going to continue to operate independently. We've continued to operate independently. These are all the things, the promises that we made. And then we ended up holding ourselves accountable to them. And I think that was a good framework for the employees to like rally behind and, watch. And so I think those are the areas that, in my mind, acquisitions can go off the rails and how to try to avoid them.
I like that tip on a promises made versus promises kept list. I don't think that applies specifically just to acquisitions. I think you could use that in a lot of different areas of life.
Life changes, so like promises can change, but I think in those scenarios you want to stick to them.
Well, that kind of segues into another question I have is like, you got to go in these with a plan, make sure values align, focus on the customer, everything you've listed so far. But we're reflecting on this a year later. What's something that's maybe surprised you about the acquisition as you've gotten to be fully into it?
Yeah, I would say two things surprised me. The first is positively just the impact that Fiix would have on Rockwell as an organization.
Yeah.
So, Fiix, a 200-person company when we were acquired. We're about 300 now, a year later, so we've grown a lot. Rockwell, a 23,000-person organization we were acquired, probably closer to 30,000 or 25,000 maybe now. And the impact that we've been able to have in shaping what the software strategy is at Rockwell has really been astounding to me. I thought there'd be a mismatch in influence there, and that hasn't been the case. Rockwell's really leaned into us and our team in terms of helping shape what the software strategy should and could be at Rockwell. That's the positive side. On the other side of it, I don't think I had an appreciation for just how big the Rockwell ecosystem was. The distribution network, and the partner network and the partner ecosystem is just massive. And I've lived it before at Microsoft and Blackberry, so I was able to wrap my head around it really quickly. But it was something that I don't think I put enough weight to the scale that the ecosystem brings. Yeah, and just how much you can leverage that to build, billion-dollar businesses.
Are there moments of excitement that come from that where it's like, gosh, I expected this when I came in, but this just opens up so many other doors, right?
You're exactly right. And nothing's easy, right? So there's no like magic key that opens a door to this like wonderful world of customer success and customer outcomes. But it certainly was like, wow, those are massive, massive opportunities for us, whether that's in North America or even globally with Rockwell's, global reach.
Yeah. Well, as someone that works for Fiix and worked for Rockwell in a past life as well, it's been pretty cool seeing everyone leverage their strengths. I think it's something that you just highlighted on there in so many words, right? Yep. You look at the reach, the ecosystem, you look at Fiix's speed, you look at the areas of expertise there. It's been pretty neat seeing that all play out.
I'm glad.
I want to take this back to Two Cats. Two Cats was the spot we were at? Yeah, okay. Let's go back to Two Cats for a second.
I hope nobody listens to this and actually goes to Two Cats because they'll be like, what? Where did James send me?
I mean, I've been exploring the beer scene while I've been on vacation here for the past couple days. So I've got plenty of breweries we can mention, but that's not what this podcast is about. But I want you to explain what Fiix does, because we've been talking about the acquisition. There are probably some people that are listening to this. I'm sure they, it's a manufacturing audience. They probably know what a CMMS is. But when someone asks you at a bar, James, what does Fiix do? How do you answer that as if you're having a drink with them?
Yeah. So maybe if I'm not at a bar, but I definitely will answer it the way that I would answer it to like my mother.
Sure.
Like she's like, what does Fiix really do?
Same question, just a different way of asking.
Yeah. So you have to get even simpler, I think.
Yeah.
And so I say, Mom, we are a software company. And we create software for manufacturing companies and large industrial companies to help them manage all of their assets.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, okay, assets. I'm like, yeah, the people that are making things, maintenance is super, super critical to keep those machines up and running. We have software that help them keep their machines up and running so that they can continue to do their business to the best of their ability. That is the simplest way that I can explain that. And usually that's for my mother, that's far enough. If I'm at a bar, usually there's a few probing questions. We start talking about cloud and API and other things. But that's the simplest explanation I have so far.
I'm interested to get your take on this because I started mixing. That's the way I described as well. I mix in another element to it. It's that we help maintenance people become more proactive rather than reactive, focusing on that human element, just making life easier for people.
It's workflow, right? And so how do you put the power back into the person's hands that are out there turning the wrench, fixing the machines? Because that's the individual that keeps the world turning. And our software helps that guy out in the field, keep the business, keep the world running. And that to me is yeoman's work. Like that's hard work. And I think underappreciated. And I feel proud to, develop software that help those people out in the world, those frontline workers, help them get their job done every day. Safely and better than they would have previously.
Absolutely. Well, it's been cool seeing everything from the inside. It's not every day you get to interview your CEO on your podcast.
Yeah, you did great. Your come review time, Chris. It's going to go awesome.
I love it. That was half the goal here. Well, the other half of I should say not the other half of the goal, but we got a couple more questions as we wrap things up. And one of them's open-ended. It's like, is there anything you wish we would have talked about today that we haven't brought up yet? It's been a pretty quick hit, rapid-fire interview on the acquisition, but is there something else that's still on your mind?
Short answer is no. I love talking about it. I love talking about our customers. I love talking about our technology. I mean, we could have had a whole podcast just on technology and how we would like to build an ecosystem of solutions and how I'd love to integrate into Rockwell products and the vision of bringing all of that together. I think there is the promise of combining machine level data from Rockwell and Rockwell's products and what Fiix and Plex, the other acquisition from Rockwell, has done. The combination of workflow and machine level data is a magical place to be in industrial. And so for all of the manufacturing leaders that are listening to this, there are baby steps that we can all take to go along that journey, but start with the right ones, because the promise of condition-based maintenance, preventative-based maintenance, running AI, like those are real technologies that can be applied today. The only thing holding us back in a lot of places is change management exercise and going through a digital journey, because everyone started from the beginning. And so we focus a ton of our time at Fiix just on helping people get off the starting line. But that journey is real. It's there. It delivers for organizations.
I will say a call to action for the audience out there, because we do talk about digital transformation, Industry 4.0 quite a bit on this show, right? And there are some people that I know are still listening to this that haven't taken that first step. You are a very good first step to jumping into that, right? If you want to dip your toe into the water, CMMS platform is a great spot to start. I couldn't totally take off my sales hat going into this interview.
Listen, it is what it is. You wouldn't be a good sales guy if you didn't. But
sure.
To take a look at, there's processes that exist everywhere in every industrial organization that are not digitized. They're still being run on paper and pen or Excel or some outdated legacy piece of software that's hard to use. The technician in the field ain't going to use it. Find those ones, get those onto software. That's step one. And so the digital journey in maintenance is really 4 steps in my mind, to really boil it down. 80% of the market is still using pen and paper to run their maintenance today. 80% of maintenance departments in North America, regardless of size of organization, are running on pen and paper today. That's a phenomenal stat. The first step from going from reactive maintenance to preventative-based maintenance, just on time-based schedule, is getting onto software. Once you're onto software, the next step is condition-based maintenance. In order to go condition-based maintenance, you have to connect your assets. That requires cloud-based software to connect to easy connectable machines. That's where the Rockwell acquisition really hums for, I think, a lot of our customers. Once you have machine level data, then you can run AI and machine learning on it to do predictive-based maintenance. So you're going from reactive to preventative to condition-based to predictive. The goal of Fiix is to have journey points all the way through that, knowing that 80% of the customers are going to start at the beginning. And we've built our roadmap against that. We've built our professional services team against that. We've built our consulting services. We've built our customer success team. Everything is built against that journey to help customers through that journey, and technology intersection points at each one of those stages. But you can start getting onto software, connecting one asset, finding a use case, doing condition-based maintenance. Excellent. I love the overview of CMMS we threw in here. Two quick, well,
One final question, then a quickie at the end of it. So, you mentioned a couple things you're excited about with the Rockwell acquisition. What's this episode's being recorded end of 2021, getting released start of 2022. What are you excited about in the new year?
Yeah, well, if you haven't heard, Chris, I'm 41. I'm having my first child.
Congrats!
In the next 2 weeks. So what I'm most excited about is being a dad.
Love it.
And doing dad things.
Yeah. I'm glad you answered that way. Normally I have to preface it. It's like, it doesn't have to be work related.
No,
right?
yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm a dad first, CEO second.
Awesome.
So my first child, I'm a little late to the game, number one at 41, but I'm mostly excited for that for next year, because I think that's just going to change everything.
Love that. Final question then to the future dad. Do you miss your Blackberry?
Yes. I do miss having the tactile keyboard, which I think a lot of people that listen to your podcast that have thumbs the size of mine would agree with. I miss having the tactile keyboard.
Understood. I enjoyed my time with that as well.
Yep.
It was a good tool, but you know what? Life moves on and it goes pretty quick.
Exactly.
So, well, for everyone out there listening, we've been talking to James Novak from Fiix Software. By the way, most of you listen to this on audio. That's Fiix with 2 I's. I just want to make sure that's clear if you're looking that up. But James, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on today's show.
Cheers, Chris.
Cheers.
Thank you.
For those of you out there, stay innovative, stay thirsty.